whilst researching different practices to expand my awareness of esoteric practices, I learned about Elder Futhark rune sets. As I love the aroma, texture, and sound of leather, I immediately had to prototype my own Elder Futhark rune set, which turned out beautifully. Simply agitating and rustling the pieces is so satisfying for my audible and tactile senses. Unlike wooden and stone runes, the sound of them jingling together has a muted and warmer tone. So like most, I should say, of my leather projects, I start off with a veg tan leather hide, which I break up into manageable pieces, and I then put into my laser cutter. Now, the laser cutter isn't really my preference. I prefer to stamp out my products, but whilst I'm in the prototyping phase and seeing if it's going to be popular enough to do so, I pop it in the laser cutter, because it's just a cheaper way of playing around with my ideas. So at this point, I have all the pieces cut out, and I have sprayed them in water, which will allow the leather to soften up, where I can now start imprinting. So I made these very small 3D printed stamps. Again, 3D printing is great for prototyping. For anything that I'm stamping on a regular basis, I get made in brass because the 3D prints don't last very long. But here I'm using a jig to line up a handful of leather, 8 in total. So I'll go through, line everything up nicely, and I'll pop it in the clicker press. Now the clicker press is capable of applying 4 tons of pressure onto whatever I put under it. And so I'm using it to stamp the impressions of the 3D stamps that I have made into the leather. And I'm turning it around here because the top and bottom of my particular clicker press is not perpendicular. So by turning it around 180 degrees after each press, I can ensure that I'm applying the same amount of pressure across the whole thing. Now, one thing I will say about this particular piece, or I guess pieces, is that it's not particularly difficult to make, but there are many steps that have to get repeated quite a lot. So the whole thing consists of 50 small pieces of leather that need processing. Now, obviously, once I've doubled them up and glued them together to make them thicker and more sturdy, I end up with 25 pieces. But those 25 pieces still have 2 sides. So I have to go to like my mind palace happy place a little bit when I'm doing this. Otherwise, I might start losing it a little bit. But that's kind of where music and podcasts kind of come into it. I tend to find that when I'm zoned out in my workshop doing leather work and I'm not particularly prototyping or trying to problem solve, the time flies by. Now, there's something really, really satisfying about prototyping and having worked out all of the steps in advance. It just makes everything just feel so satisfying, especially by the end of this particular video. I'm really pleased how these came out. Now, here you'll see me dip dyeing the leather pieces. And again, this is quite time consuming because I dip them in 2 at a time for about 8 seconds. And there's no real way of rushing that because I have to allow the excess to drip off back into the container. If I don't do that, the dye will pool and become patchy on the top. So here you'll just see me finishing up the oiling. The oil helps to remove some of the rigidity of the leather which occurs when the dyeing takes place. It also allows the leather dye to soak into the leather more and help even it out. And now I'm just swapping over the sander for the buffing wheel. And again, here we go. There is going to be, well, in this particular case, I was doing 100 in one go. So that's a lot of buffing on these runes. It takes a while, but again, the time kind of like flies by. Okay, so now it's time to apply Resolene, which is an acrylic protective coat, which I will apply to all of the runes. It doesn't make them like impervious to everything, but it's good for if they get a bit of a splash, or even to help you wipe it down with a, you know, just a gentle cloth, a moist cloth. I should say as well that this whole process takes place over a few days, because I have to allow for like the dye to dry, the oil to dry, this protective coat to dry. It's yeah, it's not something that I can really do in one day. So I made a small wooden jig for these runes, just to help me line them up. It's not perfect, but it gets me most of the way there. So I'm just applying some water-based contact adhesive onto the back of each of these runes, both the imprinted side and the blank side, and allowing them a little bit of time to dry and go tacky. Once the glue has dried and is tacky, I then press them together. Now, I kind of like have to make sure that I get it right first time, because if you ever try and pull two pieces of fabric away after you've like gently even glued them together, you can really destroy what you've put there. And the same goes for leather. If I glue two of these pieces together and I firmly press down, it's I just simply won't get them separated again. So it's a process that is not very forgiving. And unfortunately, because this is a kind of like a one of a kind, I didn't make any extras. So if at this point that I had made any mistakes, that would put me back a couple of days whilst I remake them. But the general idea here is just to apply a very thin layer of adhesive and making sure that I don't leave any clumps, which luckily this particular type of adhesive doesn't clump up like barge cement. Otherwise, it would be much harder to when it comes to doing the edges later on. Now, I am making the set available in 4 colours, which is walnut, the green, the royal blue, and a saddle tan version as well. And this is where you see the jig coming in handy. I'm not quite sure how to put this across in the video, but when I'm putting the leather in to bond the two together, I'm kind of like pushing the runes into the bottom left-hand corner to try and line everything up from the corner, rather than just like placing it haphazardly, because there's like a 1 millimeter worth of wiggle room. So rather than just throw them in there, I do try and like push everything so that the left-hand side lines up. I hope that makes sense. Here's a better shot of me trying to push everything into the bottom left-hand corner so that I get everything lined up correctly. Like I said, it just makes everything a little easier when I come to sand it. Now, I take all of these pieces that I just bonded together over to my 4-ton clicker press to apply a load of pressure into each of those pieces, which helps bond the pieces together. I find this to be quite a crucial step to ensure that there's no gaps left around the edges. Because if you end up with any gaps around the edges of the leather, when you come to do the edging and the painting later on, you can sometimes see like a seam line in the middle. So this stops that issue from happening. And again, just doing the green and the blue sets here. So at this point, I've turned 100 pieces of leather into 50 pieces of leather, which is kind of significant because when I come to do the bevel edging shortly, where I get rid of the nasty edges and create a bevel around the outside, that takes quite some time. All right, so we're back to doing the sanding again. So this is where I kind of tidy up the edges and hide my mistakes. And by hide my mistakes, I mean where I've not quite perfectly bonded the two pieces of leather together, it'll just flatten everything out nicely. I would say the hardest part of doing the sanding on something so small, well, there's two things. One is getting the rounded corners spot on. And the second is that I've had quite a few runes go flying out of my hands because I wasn't holding them hard enough, and the belt sander just flicked them across the workshop. And here's the edge beveling, which I mentioned before. So I basically go all the way around the edge of the runes on both sides, just to get rid of the nasty edge which occurs when you've been sanding it, and it gives it a nice smooth rounded finish when it comes to doing the next couple of steps. Oh, and here I couldn't help myself here. I had to I had to just play with them on this big bit of granite with these little pieces of leather. It just it was very satisfying. Okay, so here I'm using a marker pen. You can buy these empty and fill them up with whatever you like. I have a bunch filled up with different colored dyes, which I use for this edging process. And I'm just applying an undercoat for the edge paint. It just helps to hide any mistakes or imperfections that may occur when I'm applying the paint. Otherwise, with the pale edges, it can sometimes show up your work. And this is the edge coat. So this is like an acrylic paint. And I use this device here to paint evenly the edges. It uses some sort of capillary, I think I pronounced that wrong, capillary action to stop the paint from going everywhere. I find this really difficult to film. Normally I'll use two hands just to make sure that I've got everything lined up correctly, but using one hand whilst trying to spin it at the same time proved to be quite difficult here. I think that's why I only filmed me doing two of the runes. I was like, nope, I need to turn the camera off and concentrate. And it took me ages to work out where I could put these to dry. I spent a good day thinking about it, and I even went to 3D print a jig for it. In the end, I just used clothes pegs. I genuinely just I was like, oh, wait a minute. So I got the my clothes pegs out, and I sandwiched the leather between there so that the edges wouldn't get knocked. And here you'll see some EVA foam that I have cut out using my laser cutter to help with the presentation box. Very satisfying to put together, I will say that. And this is how I will be shipping all of my leather rune sets. Now, this set includes a certificate of authenticity, a thank you note. I take 2 Polaroid photos of during the process so that they've got unique photos inside as a bit of a keepsake, in case you want to scrapbook it. And yeah, I don't think I include anything else. It's not included here in the footage because I'm in the workshop and I tend to do those other bits in my office. But as you can see, I'm laying them out. I believe I'm laying them out in alphabetical order according to my research. It was limited research, but I just wanted to keep it consistent and at least make sure that when I'm shipping these, all of the symbols are the correct way around. It's that kind of attention to detail that I care about, and I just want to make sure that I get it right. I'll be interested to learn what feedback I get as and when I sell these, because I don't mind making tweaks based on, what people want. I'm not here to produce a mass manufactured item here. I'm trying to keep all of this bespoke. Money is difficult these days, and I want to make sure that when people are paying for my pieces, that you know, they feel like they're getting the value they hoped for. So with the green one done, this is the royal blue all being wrapped up, and that's the process of putting together the leather Elder Futhark Rune set, which I've been working on